All right, good morning, everyone. So today we're going to be looking at some s- scripture that shows us how to speak a little bit more clearly about stewardship, leadership, accountability, and obedience and responsibility. So the scripture we're going to be looking at is Matthew chapter 25, verse 14 through 30. So this is about the parable of the talents. So a lot of us are familiar with this parable, but familiarity can often lead us to gloss over some of the teachings, right? So we're just going to go ahead and dive in, starting at verse 14 here. For it is just like a man going on a journey who called his own slaves and entrusted his possessions to them. To one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, and to another 1, each according to his own ability, and he went on his journey. Immediately the one who had received the 5 talents went and traded with them and gained 5 more talents. In the same manner, the one who had received the 2 talents gained 2 more. But he who received the 1 talent went away and dug a hole in the ground and hid his master's money. Now, after a long time, the master of those slaves came and settled accounts with them. And the one who had received the 5 talents came up and brought 5 more talents, saying, Master, you entrusted 5 talents to me. Behold, I have gained 5 more talents. His master said to him, Well done, good and faithful slave. You can also use servant here in some translations. You were faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Enter into the joy of your master. And also the one who had received 2 talents came up and said, Master, you entrusted 2 talents to me. Behold, I have gained 2 more talents. His master said to him, Well done, good and faithful slave. Again, you can use servants here. You were faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Enter into the joy of your master. And the one who had received the 1 talent came up and said, Master, I knew you had to be a hard man, reaping where you did not sow, and gathering where you scattered no seed. And I was afraid, and went away and hid your talent in the ground. Behold, you have what is yours. But his master answered and said to him, You wicked, lazy slave, you knew that I reap where I did not sow, and gather where I scattered no seed. Then you ought to have put my money into a bank, and on my arrival I would have received my money back with interest. Therefore, take away the talent from him, and give it to the one who has 10 talents. For the one who has more shall be given, and he will have an abundance, but from the one who does not have, even what he does have shall be taken away. And throw out the worthless slave into the outer darkness. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. All right, so we're going to take a look at verse 14 here. For it is just like a man going on a journey who called his own slaves and entrusted his possessions to them. All right, so Jesus begins this stewardship. The possessions belong to the master and not to the slaves, as we clearly read. So the master go ahead and gives the talents to his servants or slaves. That just depends on the translation that you're reading. So here, this is just leadership and the authority, and who the authority belongs to. So leaders typically give out tasks to their subordinates. You're going to find this in really any job, when your parents are going to give this to you as well. So this is not unusual. This is very, very common. So authority, influence, and responsibility and opportunity, those are the things that are delegated. And a wise individual, that doesn't necessarily have to be a man in this case, a wise individual is going to understand that this is leadership and stewardship, providing or giving these tasks out, or in this case, talents. So we are accountable with what we are given. And let's go take a look at verse 15 here. To one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, and to another 1, each according to his own ability, and he went on his journey. So this verse here is teaching about the appropriate responsibility. It's not about comparison, saying one servant or slave is better than the other. It's not saying one person is going to be getting a task in your employment or wherever you're employed and saying that one person's better. It just has to do with what that person's actually capable of. So in that sense, let's say you have two children, one is 13 and the one is 6, and you give them both some money, and you give the 13-year-old, let's say $50, and the 6-year-old 15, 20, or $15 or $20. Let's just say 20. It's not that the one is worth more in your eyes. It's just that the 13-year-old should be able to handle that money a little bit better and spend it a little more frugally than the 6-year-old. It's not saying that the 6-year-old is unintelligent. It's just the 6-year-old is learning, right? That's all it is. But they are still both equally accountable for the money that they were both given. So, with that said, before I go into verse 16, God's not going to judge us based on our assignments. He's judging us on how we're given that assignment and how accountable and how responsible we are with it. So the Lord is going to be judging faithfulness with what we've been given. So verse 16, immediately the one who had received the 5 talents went and traded with them and gained 5 more talents. So the word immediately here, it's very important. So faithful stewardship, it means that you're not going to wait and stall and let time pass. You're going to go out, look for these opportunities in order and serve the Lord and be that good steward that the Lord is anticipating us to be. So, or not just anticipates, but expects us to be. So that servant who received the 5 talents, he acted very quickly, immediately, with the talents he was given. So here, no instructions were recorded, no guarantees were promised. So the leadership here requires the judgment, initiative, and risk. So clearly that slave weighed the risk and when he was presented the opportunity, and he clearly weighed it correctly because he was able to double the amount of talents he was initially given. All right, verse 17. In the same manner, the one who had received the 2 talents gained 2 more. Again, this slave doubled the talents he was given, just as the first did. So again, here it just says in the same manner. So again, that slave or servant went out immediately and weighed the risk, and he was able to double the talents that his master had given him. So it's the same amount of faithfulness, same amount of obedience, and quite frankly, you could potentially weigh it on the same scale. Just because that they were given a different quantity of talents doesn't make one inferior to the other. It's just they had different levels of skill. Now, verse 18. But he who received the 1 talent went away and dug a hole in the ground and hid his master's money. So the servant does not rebel openly, and like children, sometimes we don't talk back, but we'll go do something that goes against what our parents have said. So now this was a fear-based action. I forget if it was in this verse or previous verse here. Let me take a look here. So that was 17. Yeah, here, verse 24. We aren't there yet, but Master, I knew you to be a hard man, and reaping how the master reaps and sows. That slave hid the talents. Here we go. Sorry, I had to go back and find where we were at. So yeah, so this servant, out of fear, went and hid the talents his master gave him. And yes, it does look cautious in the beginning, but considering the fact that they were each given talent that is equal to their own ability, he did nothing with it. So he was fearful and fell into sin by avoiding responsibility. So it's not wisdom, it wasn't patience, he just hid it. And then in verse 19, here, now after a long time, the master of those slaves came and settled accounts with them. So eventually the master does return. Accountability is not delayed. Uh, they quickly go and give their master what the master gave them and the interest on top of it. Or, excuse me, not the interest, but the amount that they were able to accrue on top of what they were given. And verse 20, and the one who had received the 5 talents came up and brought 5 more talents, saying, Master, you entrusted 5 talents to me. Behold, I have gained 5 more talents. So here the servant acknowledges acknowledges the trust that was given or bestowed upon him, and uh, gives it back to his master. So leadership begins with owning responsibility and not taking credit. So verse 21, his master said to him, Well done, good and faithful slave. You were faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Enter into the joy of your master. So here God's praising the faithfulness of the servant. He's not rewarding the servant based on what he was able to build on top of what the master had given him. That's seen in the next verse, because the reward was given to this, or the same reward was given to the slave that was given 2 talents and doubled it to 4. So it was the same rewards given, whether that be 10 or 4. So that's based on faithfulness. And also to the one who had received the 2 talents came up and said, Master, you entrusted the 2 talents to me. Behold, I had gained 2 more talents. So as I just said, he's mirroring the first slave that received the 10. However, here in verse 23, his master, sorry, it's going to be verse 24, but his master said to him, Well done, good and faithful slave. You were faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Enter into the joy of your master. Identical reward or commendation. Verse 24, and the one who had received the 1 talent came up and said, Master, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you did not sow and gathering where you scattered no seed. So the servant is misrepresenting the master's character. So leadership failure often begins with the distortion of God's view. So when obedience is seen as unsafe and fear replaces trust. So this slave is fearful and didn't trust his master. So therefore he's going to be receiving well, nothing. But hang on, I lost where the verse we were at here. Here we go. So he's not going to be receiving a reward for hiding it, because here the master says, or the servant says, and I was afraid and went away and hid your talent in the ground. Behold, you have what is yours. So, as I said, if fear is governing his decision, he'd rather preserve himself than go out and take a risk and double what his master had given him. And that is not obedience, because here the Lord is expecting us to go out and use what he has given us. And quite simply, this individual, this servant, did not. But his master answered and said to him, You wicked, you lazy slave, you knew that I reap where I did not sow and gather where I scattered no seed. So it's not that the slave failed, it was the wickedness of the slave that he chose to go and hide the talent. And it was the laziness of inactivity. He was avoiding the responsibility. And if you have the knowledge of the accountability that was bestowed upon you and you disregard it, that's where you're sinning. Then the master says in verse 27, Then you ought to have put my money in the bank, and on my arrival I would have received my money back with interest. So here, the at least sorry, lots of notifications here. So here, the master was saying you at least could have put it in the bank at bare minimum, which is the minimum obedience here, and he would have been able to at least claim the interest on it. But instead, he chose to do nothing. He chose to ignore his responsibility. Verse 28, 28. Therefore, take away the talent from him and give it to the one who has 10 talents. So unused stewardship is eventually removed, and the leadership is not exercised and will be forfeited over time. You can see that in some workplaces today. Some of the leaderships that choose to do nothing, eventually that will get back to that person's leader or boss, and that person will have consequences. I'm not going to say what those are because, again, depends on where you are or where you work, rather. So, for to everyone who has more shall more, or sorry, for to everyone who has more shall be given, and he will have an abundance. From the one who does not have, even what he does have shall be taken away. So, this is just spiritual reality. It's not favoritism. It's just the faithfulness is expanding on the capacity. So, passivity is going to shrink it. So, neutrality is non existent. Verse 30. Throw out the worthless slave into the outer darkness. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. So worthless here, it does not mean that the servant was incapable. It just means that he was unproductive by his own choice, or usually his. But judgment comes not for the imperfect outcomes. It's going to be for the refusal to what the steward was entrusted with. So it's not favoritism. It's just reality that if you're not going to do what the Lord expects or what the Lord provided and gave you, then it's going to be taken away. And I'm just reading it as it's worded here. So here, God is entrusting you, either be man or woman, with whatever it is that He's entrusted you with. Now, for this men's group, I am talking to the men, but it does apply to women as well. The question is not whether that you feel ready; it's really whether that do you trust the master, because the master is trusting you by giving you whatever that he's given you. So he's not going to condemn you for failing. Let me make that perfectly clear. The condemnation's going to be upon you whether you chose to not do something, whether you chose to not take action with it. And so we each have a responsibility. So let's not bury it. So we're called to be faithful stewards. And that's where we are supposed to be obedient. So this men's community here, we're called to be stewards and we're called to be shepherds. So we're called to lead more people to Jesus. So we're called to take care of Jesus's flock. And in doing so, we have a lot of responsibility upon us to teach the Word of God as it is written and not put extra words in. So, which is something that is difficult to do at times because we'll read a passage, then start applying it to our own lives and inserting our own lives into it. It's not bad if you want to use that as examples, as very clear and poignant examples to a passage, but you do have to take extra caution in it because your life is not the your own life is not going to be a perfect example of a passage. So do take caution in that. So you have to steward faithfully. It's really what it is. And I'm just making sure that we covered everything here between leaders and stewardships here, and it looks like we have. So that is going to be the end of this one. I hope you all have a blessed day, and stay in the Word, or give the Lord all the praise, all the worship. Give Him everything that you have. And always remember, in what you do in your daily task is how are you going to be able to glorify God today? And live for the Lord. That's all it is. All right, I will catch you all later. Remember that we do have a meeting Sunday, February 1st at 6:30. I hope to see everyone there. And all right, I hope you all have a blessed day. Bye.